Transfers, lost a very fair number of transfers. Nathan A. Clark. Richarlison, of course, the big un that came in this summer. Transfer marked have this down as 52, but I remember reading it was 60, or maybe that was 60 million euros. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
With add-ons.
Yes. Yves Bissouma, we see, hasn't played that much. Also a player hasn't played that much is Jed Spence. We have Ivan Perisic came in on a free, as well as Clement Longley, amongst others. And of course, before that, in the January transfer window, there were the two stellar signings of Dejan Kulusevski and Bentancur. What's his first name?
Rodrigo
Bentancur, who seemed to make a sort of instant improvement with the team. How do you feel so far about the performances of the players who arrived this summer, to the extent that we've seen them?
Yeah, we haven't. Well, the main thing is that we haven't seen a ton of them yet. Which you're always going to get to an extent with Conte. He wants them to learn the patterns, right? He wants them to learn the exact system inside out and prove their ability with them before they see the pitch at all, right?
Richarlison, we've seen a fair amount.
Yeah. But obviously the forward most player is the player with the most freedom to finish moves however they like. But also, I think he has so much graft, and he's come off the bench so well that he's forced his way into the team. I think in a way that has negatively affected the team for 3 games on the bounce.
Really?
Right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's not a criticism of Richarlison. Let me clarify that. But, Richarlison's brilliant, but we've gone through a period of time where Kane and Son have not been dropped, right? Because, of course, they're excellent. Richarlison's come off the bench, being excellent himself, deserves a starter's results. So Kulusevski has been on the bench. The problem with that is that Kulusevski is the carrier of the ball, the creator, the person who links the forwards to the midfield, the midfield to the forwards. Richarlison is another forward, right? So we've had this really disbalanced team where you have this sort of FIFA lineup of 3 strikers and not much supply getting to them.
Right.
We went back to having Kulusevski start against Leicester, and we were a lot better for it, I think.
Were you surprised to see him start on the bench for a few games, Kulusevski? Because, I mean, I haven't paid that close attention to Spurs, but everything I've heard has suggested that he's been maybe their best player since January.
I think there's a good case for that. I think...
Producer Don nodding over there in the corner. Spurs fan. He agrees so hard with me that he's silently nodding. Thank you, Don.
Yeah. So Son went on this stretch without scoring, right? And Conte was very consistent in the press. He's brilliant. He's an incredible player. He's getting the shots. A little expected goals kind of side reference there. He will start scoring, of course he will, and he has done now.
A hat-trick against Leicester.
But the inside left role sort of isn't great for him. Outside of him being played through, he doesn't receive the ball well in front of the defence very well. So when he's not scoring, he doesn't play very well under Conte, essentially. The previous North London derby aside. So there's been calls for us to drop Son, but then he's wanted to demonstrate his confidence in Son by playing him through that period.
Which you'd have to say has worked, arguably.
Well, he finally benches Son. Son comes for Kulusevski to start. Son comes off the bench, scores a hat-trick. I think
the final part of the master plan, the automatism of how to deal with human emotions.
You've got it. There you go. Yeah. But it's just left us in this awkward phase for a little bit where Kulusevski wasn't starting games, and I think that we are actually quite relying on him to play the games we want to play. Okay.
What about other players then, aside from... Actually, tell me what Richarlison does offer. You've described him already as a kind of like another forward and maybe not one to replace Kulusevski, but what is it that he does offer, even if it is coming off the bench?
Well, his graft is incredible. He sort of profiles most similarly to Son in that he is a threat running in behind and a goal threat who can play in the 2 wide positions. Hopefully, the main thing that he will bring this season, which through no fault of his own, he's failed to do so far pretty much, is take some minutes away from Kane and Son and allow them to rest. So I guess finally at the weekend against Leicester, he put Son on the bench.
You were quite angry after the Champions League game, right?
Yeah.
Because
which one, John?
Sporting. The recent loss against Sporting, because you're seeing Richarlison, as I understand, as a player who can come in for Kane in those games.
Yeah.
And it just gives you a little bit more flexibility. But Richarlison, as you're saying, is being used as a wide forward pretty much exclusively so far.
Yeah, I don't mind him. I mean, obviously, at some point, Kane needs to rest, right? And Richarlison is the natural, or the closest to natural replacement for that, right? Richarlison has more of the physical presence that Son doesn't have to play the centre forward role. He can't turn on a dime and ping a 50-yard perfect lofted through ball like no one can, right? Messi, whatever. But he should be able to do a role in the centre forward position, and maybe he needs a while longer to learn that role in training, which is what we're not seeing. But while he's not taking minutes from Kane and Son, he's doing everything brilliantly well, but he's not doing the main purpose of him, again, through no fault of his own.
Okay. Yves Bissouma is a player that was, like long touted by other fans of top six sides coming from Brighton. He hasn't really played very much, has he?
So again, this is a really sort of good timing. He hasn't played much. He looked rough in the game that he played. Can't remember which one. West Ham, maybe? West Ham.
It was, yeah.
Very, very simplified passing game, which is actually what you saw from him last season at Brighton, playing as the deepest midfielder there, because of the way Graham Potter likes to use his wide centre-backs. But yeah, it's taken a while to adjust to the automatisms of Conte, and then against Leicester came off the bench, allowed Spurs to switch to a three-man midfield, which they needed in that game because they were being overrun. With
him as the deepest player.
With Bissouma as the deepest player, allowing Højbjerg and Bentancur to be much more aggressive defensively, and also being aggressive in his own sweeping behind those two, and without necessarily being excellent himself, although I think he was fine. What he allowed us to do tactically in that situation was really strong and promising for what he can do going forwards.
It's always interesting when bigger teams buy players that I would consider, that maybe would be a starter in many other teams. When they don't get minutes, I think there's a problem. But then I forget that, like at the biggest teams, they just have incredible squads where players do only play 24 Premier League games a season, for example. With Bissouma, do you think it's one of those cases? Is he intended to be a rotation option in a team that doesn't rotate very often?
Well, I think that was the intention, is that we have like 6 wing backs on the book nearly. We have 5 central midfielders. Yeah. So the idea is for us to rotate. We haven't seen it so much so far.
But are these Paratici? How do I say his name? Paratici. Are these Paratici signings, or are these? Why are you laughing at me?
No, it's fine.
How dare you laugh at me on my podcast? Are these Paratici signings, or are these Conte signings? Like, it's the who would have done that one?
The history is that Levy was our recruitment department, and we stepped away from that. Brought in Paratici, and he
I believe it's Paratici.
Sure. He sort of overtook what was happening under Nuno, I think, for the most part, and then most of what happened in the summer was a back and forth, the discussion between the two Italians and who the profiles Conte was looking for and who they wanted to bring in.
Right.
Jed Spence was as I understand it, a Levy operation, a little side project to keep him busy.
I see.
Yeah.
But
is that perhaps why
I was
going to
say traditionally Conte has always rotated his wing backs, right? He subs his wing backs off at 60 minutes. So that's a sort of accepted rotation. So that is a bit weird for him to not be doing that as much, right?
Yeah, I think he wants to. I think he knows he should. For Emerson Royale to have played as much as he could is quite something. It speaks to his own stamina to have done those minutes. Again, we have the numbers in the squads. I think it's about getting Doherty's fitness, Spence's readiness. We've seen the rotation on the left side. It's just that the left side is now affecting, or the right side is now affecting the left side because Perisic started on the right in the previous game.
And what about Clement Longley?
He's good. I like him. So the concern
is he playing in one of the outside centre back roles?
Yeah. So as a left footer, he is being now pretty evenly rotated with Ben Davies. Although I think that he will, if he hasn't already sort of usurped Davies as the first choice left-sided centre-back. But I think it's going to continue to be pretty even between the two of them. The concern with him was that he was extremely error-prone at Barcelona. I went back and sort of looked over his history of errors in his performances for Barcelona, and I think that he was pretty unfairly, overly criticised. It's had the shape that Barcelona have been for the last few years. He's an improvement on the ball on Ben Davies, and Ben Davies isn't bad on the ball as sort of he's had a full career as a goods ball playing left fullback, right? And hasn't made defensive errors, which I guess is sort of the main thing we're looking for there. So yeah, Longley's come in and done the squad improving rotation thing that he's meant to have done.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.